Hello and welcome to our channel where stories aren't just told, they're felt with every heartbeat. Each video is a journey through emotions, tales of loyalty, love, and hope in a world often filled with storms. If you too believe that a story can comfort the soul and stir something deep within, don't forget to subscribe and join us, because this emotional journey wouldn't be complete without you. Walker was once one of the city's most respected criminal investigators. Over a decade on the force, he solved hundreds of cases with skill and unwavering integrity. And by his side was always his trusted partner, Shadow, a Malinois canine. More than a working dog, was a guiding light through the darkest investigations. But today, Ethan stood in shackles, not as a witness or commander, but as a defendant. His hands were cuffed, his face was calm but pale. His eyes met the courtroom, straight on, showing no fear. Outside reporters swarmed the courthouse. News headlines screamed of the greatest betrayal in police history. The accusation: Ethan had allegedly leaked classified information to an underground crime syndicate. The proof: a blurry surveillance video of a man resembling him exchanging something in an abandoned garage. The damning witness: none other than his longtime partner, Sergeant Ryan Bell. The revelation struck the force like a bolt of lightning. Inside the courtroom, few believed in Ethan's innocence. He remained nearly silent throughout the trial, only raising his head when the judge asked, "Do you have anything to say before the court adjourns?" Ethan stood. His voice was low, rough, caught somewhere deep in his throat. "Your Honor, I have only one request." He looked the judge directly in the eye. "Let me see Shadow one last time." The room held its breath. Some frowned, others scoffed, but after a long pause, the judge gave a slow nod. Perhaps he too saw something in Ethan's eyes, not of a man pleading for mercy, but of one holding on to truth. Moments later, the back door creaked open. A handler led Shadow into the courtroom. His dark gray coat shimmered under the warm lights. Shadow's gait was confident, his eyes scanning each face as he could see through the lies. He paused, then spotted Ethan. The dog froze for a heartbeat. Ears perked, then bolted toward his partner. But something unexpected happened. Just a few steps from Ethan, Shadow suddenly changed direction. He didn't leap into Ethan's arms as most expected. Instead, he veered, weaving between courtroom benches, nose twitching, sniffing. Then he stopped dead in his tracks before a single person: Sergeant Ryan Bell. Before anyone could react, Shadow erupted into loud, sharp barks. He stared at Ryan with intense, unwavering eyes, his whole body tense like a signal flaring into the silence. "Back up," a guard shouted. But Shadow didn't lunge. He didn't attack. He just stood, barking with purpose, refusing to look away. Ryan instinctively stepped back, face paling. He clutched his briefcase tighter, like a shield. The judge raised his hand. "What's going on here?" Ethan, still in cuffs, spoke quietly. "Your Honor, Shadow never reacts like this unless something's wrong." A nearby officer approached Ryan, gesturing toward the briefcase. "Open it now." "It's nothing," Ryan stammered. "Just my personal files." "We'll be quick," the officer replied firmly. The room thickened with tension. Shadow remained still, barking, then pausing, then barking again, as if urging everyone to see what he already sensed. The judge watched silently. Perhaps a seed of doubt had been planted. The briefcase opened, just papers. Then something dropped. A small black USB drive hit the floor. Ryan's face went white. "What's that?" the officer asked. Just a flash drive," Ryan murmured, voice trembling. "Check it immediately," the judge ordered. "This hearing is adjourned." Shadow returned to Ethan's side in the chaos and sat silently. It was as if the dog understood that he had just saved his handler from a crushing defeat. Ethan leaned down, gently resting his hand on Shadow's back. He whispered, "You just did what no one else could. Thank you, my friend." No one knew what was on the USB, but the air in the courtroom had changed. The cold glances of doubt had softened now, glimmering with a flicker of hope. A trust once betrayed, perhaps, just perhaps, still had a path back. And that path began with a single bark from Shadow. The courtroom was immediately sealed. No one was allowed to leave until the USB was examined. A team of forensic techs rushed the device to a secure evidence room, where a team of digital investigators began their urgent work. Meanwhile, Shadow lay at Ethan's feet, breathing calmly, ears perked and alert to every movement. Still in handcuffs, Ethan couldn't hide the gratitude in his eyes. Gratitude for the four-legged partner who had shattered the silence of suspicion. Less than 30 minutes later, a forensic officer returned. He leaned in and whispered something into the judge's ear. The judge's brows furrowed. After a brief pause, he struck his gavel. This hearing is suspended. New evidence has been uncovered, and the investigation will be expanded. The defendant, Ethan Walker, will remain in custody pending further inquiry. Ethan didn't protest. For him, the simple fact that the trial hadn't ended in injustice was a sign of hope. After the session, Shadow wasn't allowed to leave with Ethan. Per department regulations, K-9 units under investigation had to be temporarily assigned to qualified officers, and the one assigned was Lieutenant Harper. She wasn't a stranger years ago. Harper had been a standout trainee, mentored directly by Ethan during her K-9 certification. He had taught her everything: how to read a working dog's behavior, move as one unit during high-risk raids, and trust without question. Now taking Shadow's leash from the handler, Harper felt a knot tighten in her chest. Not just because of her respect for Ethan, but because of the look in Shadow's eyes, searching, loyal, and confused, as if wondering where his partner had gone. She knelt beside him, whispering gently as she stroked his neck. "He'll be okay, and we're going to help him." That night, Harper returned to her office and inserted the USB into a secure workstation. She put on her headphones, adjusted the volume, and pressed play. There was static at first, then a voice. A man's voice, cold, calculating, unmistakable. "We can't let that investigation continue. Ethan's getting too close. He'll uncover the shipment at the South Port." Another voice cut in, calmer but no less threatening. "Then we distract him, frame him. One video is all it takes. We've got someone in forensics. It'll go smoothly." Harper's fist clenched. The first voice. It belonged to Lieutenant Nolan, a high-ranking official in internal affairs. The recording continued, detailing the setup, how they planned the fake exchange, manipulated evidence, and used Ryan as a pawn. Harper didn't need to hear more. She already knew the truth. Ethan had been betrayed by the people he had once trusted the most. The next morning, Harper walked into the judge's private chambers, the USB and its transcript in hand. He listened in silence, his face growing colder by the second. When the playback ended, he nodded slowly. "I'll authorize an expanded investigation," he said, looking seriously at Harper. "But be warned, this runs deep. If you plan to chase it, you'd better be ready." "I'm not going alone," Harper replied, her eyes drifting to Shadow standing beside her, his ears alert, eyes gleaming as if he understood every word exchanged. That evening, Harper brought Shadow back to her small suburban apartment. She had prepared a dog bed for him, but Shadow didn't rest. Instead, he paced quietly near the front door, then sat still, staring through the glass. Harper joined him on the floor. "You miss him, don't you?" she whispered. Shadow glanced at her, then slowly rested his head on her feet with a deep, quiet sigh. Harper gave a soft, sorrowful smile. She knew Ethan wasn't just Shadow's handler. He was the only human the dog had ever completely trusted. What Harper didn't expect, though, was that Shadow wasn't done yet. The next morning, as Harper prepared to visit the department's archive to dig into old records, Shadow suddenly barked sharp and loud, then bolted down the hallway. "What is it, Shadow?" He led her to the parking garage beneath headquarters, then without warning veered into a forgotten storage bay once used for decommissioned personal items. Shadow sniffed furiously at a corner of the wall and growled. Harper crouched beside him, running her hand along the surface. There, barely visible, was a faint scratch on the brick, as if something had once been taped there. After a few tense minutes of searching, she unlocked an old cabinet tucked in the shadows. Inside, she found a phone with its battery removed and a small stack of handwritten notes. Notes from Ethan. The scribbles were rough but clear. License plates, timestamps, and a diagram linking a port warehouse to a suspicious logistics company. Harper dropped to the floor, heart pounding. Ethan had uncovered the trafficking route long before his arrest and was collecting proof when they framed him. She ran her hand down Shadow's back. "You're leading me in the right direction." That afternoon, Harper submitted everything, the notes, the phone, the port maps, to the judge's office and the prosecutor's team. This time, no one could look away. The trail of circumstantial clues was forming into a pattern, and Ethan stood squarely in the middle of it. Not as a criminal, but as the key. That night back at home, Shadow finally jumped onto the couch beside Harper, resting his head gently on her lap, as if he was finally allowing himself a moment of peace. "We've found the first spark of light, Shadow," she said. Stars began appearing across the dark sky outside the window, silent and steady. much like the loyalty of a dog who had never turned his back on his partner. 3 days after the USB was officially accepted into evidence, Harper and Shadow still chased leads, scattered threads in a tangled web. The internal investigation had begun, but someone from the top was clearly pulling strings. Important records vanished. Key staff members were suddenly reassigned. As Harper turned to the final page of an old case file that evening, Shadow barked again, loud and urgent. He dashed to the far end of the department's dusty record room toward a rust-covered shelving unit no one had touched in years. Harper followed, pulse racing. Shadow had led her to an abandoned storage room. Beneath the flicker of her flashlight, Harper saw a filing cabinet with no label. Its lock rusted shut. She pulled the drawer open. It creaked like a sigh from the past. Inside were stacks of files stamped pending destruction. Harper flipped through one, then another. On the third, she froze. Shadow, you just found what they never wanted us to see. It was a list of wrongful arrests cases from the past 3 years, each with disturbingly familiar details. Unclear surveillance footage, single witness testimonies, unverified tips, the most chilling discovery. Many of the accused had vanished without a trace. Harper didn't hesitate. She scanned and saved everything, then filed an official report, but within an hour, everything disappeared. The internal database had been breached. The servers were inaccessible. Her backups were wiped clean. Everything she had just found was gone in an instant. No one was answering the phone. The stairs inside police headquarters were changing, becoming unfamiliar. Cold watchful, Harper knew she and Shadow were now the ones being hunted. With no other option left, she went to the only person who could truly understand the situation, Ethan. Still in isolation, Ethan was granted visitor access under the pretense of assisting with the investigation. When Harper arrived, his eyes flared with caution, but softened when he saw Shadow silently trailing behind her. "You've got 3 minutes," the guard said curtly. Harper wasted no time. "We don't have long. The data's been wiped. The system's been breached. They're erasing everything, and we're being watched." Ethan studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "There's still one place," he murmured. "An off-network archive. I once stored original copies of the internal affairs reports there. But it's deep in the old basement. Nobody's allowed down there anymore." Harper narrowed her eyes. "Then that's exactly where we're going." "It won't be easy," Ethan warned. "But I have a plan." As headquarters settled into stillness that night, Harper triggered a diversion in the surveillance system. Ethan quietly released for 40 minutes thanks to a trusted officer slipped out of holding. Shadow took the lead, nose low to the ground, tracking through the dust-choked halls of the lower levels. The basement corridor was abandoned, untouched by modernization. No cameras, no digital locks. The steel door lay between two concrete walls, weathered with time. Harper keyed in a code, an old one Ethan had remembered. The lock clicked. Inside were rows of sealed filing cabinets. Ethan moved fast. His hand stopped on one drawer, eyes lighting up. "Here it is, the original memory card." They never found it. A sharp metal clatter echoed behind them. A figure stepped into view at the far end of the hallway. Another silhouette emerged from the other side. Flashlights cut through the shadows. "Don't move." Harper drew her sidearm. Ethan slid the card into his inner jacket pocket. One of the men approaching was the guard who used to watch over Ethan, a man they had once trusted. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, raising his weapon. "I warned you." In that instant, Shadow lunged lightning fast, his teeth clamping down on the man's arm. The gunshot rang out like thunder. Harper screamed. Shadow was hit. The dog collapsed, blood soaking through his back. Fur. Ethan spun around, striking the second intruder with a surprise blow. He dropped, groaning. Harper fell to her knees, gathering Shadow into her arms, tears streaking down her cheeks. Shadow's breath was shallow, but he was alive, his eyes still locked on Ethan's, telling him, pleading. "Go." Ethan turned, eyes flickering toward the approaching footsteps, echoing in the dark. "Go. Now get him out of here," he said to Harper. "I'll hold them off." Harper choked back a sob and nodded, clutching Shadow tight. She turned and ran, Ethan's final cry chasing her down the corridor. "Protect the evidence." As she burst from the basement, gunfire cracked behind her. She sprinted through empty halls, climbed the emergency stairs, and vanished into the shadows of the underground garage. In her coat pocket, a memory card is intact, original and untouched. In her arms, a fading heartbeat, but not yet gone. As the car pulled away from the lot, Harper whispered, "Hold on, Shadow. You did your part. Now it's my turn. We haven't lost yet, Shadow. Not while he's still fighting, and especially not while you're still breathing. In the cover of darkness, the car disappeared into a sleeping city. The news broke on a foggy Monday morning. Not from the police, not from the courts, but from the press. The original file, the memory card Harper had risked everything to protect, finally reached the hands of an independent investigative journalist, and within 24 hours, Ethan Walker flooded the front pages everywhere. Only this time it wasn't next to the word criminal. The headline read, "Framed Hero, the truth behind Officer Ethan's arrest." A public broadcast followed a voice recording from the first USB, paired with images of Ethan's handwritten notes before he was taken into custody. The voice of his former superior echoed across television screens discussing how to forge evidence, frame Ethan, and use him as a scapegoat for a far larger cover-up. The city was stunned, and once federal investigators stepped in, the curtain could no longer stay drawn. 3 days later, Ethan was released. As he stepped out from the detention center, gates, he said nothing. He stood there momentarily, taking in a deep breath of morning air, something he'd only known through iron bars for weeks. In front of him stood Harper, waiting, and to his left, Shadow, still bandaged, limping. But those eyes burned bright, just like the day he burst into the courtroom. Ethan knelt, arms open. Shadow didn't run to him. He strolled deliberately, each step steady, almost as if to say, "I'm still here, and I never gave up." When that familiar head leaned into his chest, Ethan closed his eyes. His heart finally rested for the first time in what felt like forever. What followed struck like a storm through the system. Senior officers were arrested. Old case files reopened. Wrongful convictions re-examined. Harper was honored for her courage and perseverance. Shadow was awarded the National Medal of Valor for Service Dogs, a distinction not given to any canine in the last 20 years. The ceremony was held in front of a massive crowd at the city square. Ethan stood on a simple wooden stage beside Harper, and Todd, who now wore a silver-starred collar around his neck. The MC's voice cracked slightly as he spoke. "Not everyone can sniff out the truth, but today we honor a life that did not for rank, not for reward, but simply for loyalty." The entire square rose in applause. Shadow stood still, ears perked, gaze fixed on something distant in the crowd, until Ethan leaned down and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, old friend," he whispered. 1 week later, Ethan submitted his resignation. No one could convince him to stay. He held no bitterness. He didn't deny the years behind him. He said, "I've done my duty inside the system. Now I'll help people out here learn how to protect themselves with a partner who listens and feels." And so the Walker and Shadow Civilian K-9 Training Center was born on the outskirts of town, a wide-open stretch of land soaked in sunlight, fenced with white rails, and alive with barking. Every dawn, Ethan didn't just teach commands or bite drills. He taught something deeper: how to read a dog's emotions, how to trust instinct, how to listen for things no one says aloud. One crisp autumn afternoon, Harper returned, folder in hand. "Still chasing the truth?" Ethan asked, pouring her a cup of coffee. Harper nodded, then glanced over at Shadow, resting peacefully beneath the shade of a tree by the fence line. "Did you know it was Shadow who picked up the scent of blood in the archive room that day, from a missing victim's shirt buried deep beneath the rubble?" Ethan smiled gently. "I'm not surprised." She looked at him, voice quieter now. "You never doubted him, did you?" Ethan shook his head. "Not once." "Because he doesn't know how to lie." The day faded slowly. Ethan and Shadow walked along the dirt path behind the training center, across the golden fields, where the evening wind whispered like the breath of the earth itself. Shadow still moved beside him, not as fast as before, but steady. The wound had healed. The instincts remained sharp, and those eyes, as fierce and faithful as ever. Ethan stopped in the middle of the trail, looking out toward the glowing red horizon. The sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows outlining the silhouettes of two companions, as if caught in the final frame of a storybook that had no end. He turned to Shadow, eyes warm with a gratitude that had never faded. "You know," he said softly, I lost my honor." He knelt, running a hand slowly along Shadow's back, a simple gesture that carried the weight of all the unspoken things. "Yet, and I won it back because of someone who doesn't know how to lie, and that someone is you." Shadow gave a soft wag of his tail, and in that moment there was no need for more words. They stood there side by side in the fading light, as if every battle had been fought, every truth laid bare, and finally, the light had returned. Thank you for listening to this emotional story. If the journey of Ethan and Shadow touched your heart, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Every follow is a spark of encouragement for us to keep bringing you more stories full of humanity, hope, and heart. See you in the next video.